Hi, and welcome to Learn Up Centers. Learn Up Centers is a nonprofit reading center. We're on a mission to change how we teach all types and all ages of learners to read. So we're excited to have Steve Tattum here. Steve is a 40-year veteran teaching kids with dyslexia how to read. He's developed his own reading program. He's the former director of curriculum at the Denver Academy. He is currently on staff at the Stern School and Learn Up Center's reading director. He's going to walk through the presentation, and then at the end, we'll have time for questions and answers. There's a chat box where you can ask questions and talk amongst yourselves if you have observations or things you'd like to know about. There's also a question and answer panel that you can raise your hand on and ask questions, and I'll be happy to either give you the floor and have you speak directly to Steve, or I will ask for you. If you want to be anonymous, let me know. Steve, take it away.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. This may be a controversial presentation, but what I've come up with is really what experienced phonetic teachers arrive to themselves when they work with a wide variety of students. I work with students between the age of 5 and 65. So I've had a lot of experience. I've trained approximately about 4,000 teachers in both Michigan and Colorado at this point. I was program director at Denver Academy for 35 years. And Denver Academy worked with students who could not read and needed phonics. Those who had phonics and were ready for directed reading, where we did 6 syllables and we worked with short stories and novels. And others who were ready for whole language, as Nancy Atwell presents it. And I taught 3 different types of teachers: systematic phonics, directed reading, whole language. So obviously, I'm not just a phonics guy. A lot of individuals have just been taught a phonics program and think that's the end all. Well, I realize where phonics fits into the total field of reading, and that's influenced a lot of my decisions, okay? I've also worked dropout prevention nationally in St. Thomas, New Orleans, Texas, New York, for about 20 years. And I've worked with Beyond Basics in Detroit for about 10 years, who did inner city intervention. And our program has just been adopted by Detroit high schools to work with all the students who are below reading level. And we just started that project before the virus occurred, but we'll continue that. So, little theoretical view. First, we know kids can identify differences in sound at 9 months old. And how we know that is if you go but, and they're sucking like a bottle, they'll suck the same. But if you go but, they'll suck more, showing that they've noticed a difference in the sounds. Neurologists know, and experienced reading teachers know, that learning the letter names first is a hazard or an obstacle rather than a necessity. And when I work with kindergartens, which I've worked with many, 30 or 40 different kindergartens, we start right to the sounds. So rather than it's a B, it's a B. So they identify those as sounds. We'll teach the alphabet song just to get that sequence in their mind. But right off the bat, when we point to the letter D, they're saying D, not the letter. And it's pretty straightforward. If you see the word B-A-D and you try to sound it out with letter names, it's B-A-D. But if you sound it out, sounds bad, it's clear. Also spelling. You know, if you're spelling the word bad, and you know, you're trying to go from B maybe to B, maybe an A, but you don't know. I mean, they don't correspond exactly. So we teach letter sounds right off the bat in kindergarten, which makes moving it to first grade pretty easily, okay? Now, I've been in 5 different Orton programs. I was in the Green Manual. I was studied Project Read, Wilson. Slingerland is the one I started with in 1973. I became more of an expert in alphabetic phonics, and I learned from Ailid Cox, who I think was one of the great master teachers in this field. And what I learned from her is go as fast as you can, as slow as you must. As fast as you can, as slow as you must. And I've taken that to heart, which you'll see, okay? Now, orton-gillingham, Orton recognized that kids were flipping letters, and he identified that as the right hemisphere was showing the flip side of the letters. It kind of had a reversal. And he felt that there were right hemisphere issues, which he was correct at, but the flipping wasn't really the issue. What happens is they neurologically using the right side to process language, and it's inefficient. But what he did, he was a fan of the Fernald method. He recommended tying it down by writing, which tied down the letter. Since the right hand correlates with the left hemisphere, it helps tie that letter down to the hemisphere. And so the 8 linkages developed on how to teach a sound, and you taught maybe a sound a day. Okay, I did that. And I was one of the fastest linkagers in the West. I could do it in 7 minutes, all 8 linkages. And I had a class, a group of 3 that I was doing the linkages with for 3 months. And then I got a couple more added at the last minute. Anyone who teaches at school knows how that is. And I had to catch them up. So I caught them up without the linkages, clearing up their sounds pretty quickly. And lo and behold, I noticed they did just as well as the ones I did the linkages with. That's when I started to doubt that system. Now, Orton, again, ties the letter to fine motor, okay? I also taught the lips program that ties the sounds to mouth positions, and that works real well. It worked real well. Lips is not being done as much as it used to be, but they tied it to lip position. I tie it up to motor, to gross motor, which is more fun, etc. Now, I don't do name and keyword because those are interference systems. In other words, a apple a does not really help you out if you're going b, a apple a. You've now got this interference. I just teach the sound, and I'll do movements to key off the sounds. So now, how I teach the letters has a lot to do with what start students are at, okay? So you're going to see me go back and forth a bit to the screen. Okay.
What's up?
All right, you should be seeing Tattum reading lessons. This is just the cover of my lessons book. I have a manual and lessons. The lessons is really short and sweet. We have a full 3 or 4 lessons on 1 page. Incidentally, I'm not interested in selling my materials. This is not a marketing ploy. In fact, I'll give you some books that are not my own, but I do use mine because for copyright reasons, it just makes sense. Okay, now we break things down into 5 starts. Okay, we have the pre-reader. This is a child who just hasn't been introduced to reading. And with those students, I recommend what everyone does, which is reading to the child on a daily basis, just reading to them. Don't ask questions the first read. And then when you're done, go back and ask questions. And basically getting the child to do some rhymes and do some, is this word the same as this word, hit, cop, some auditory, some pre-skills. But I also start working on sounds at this level, okay? Now the non-reader, this is what we run into when I'm testing kids between 5 and 65. I'm not getting a pre-reader. I'm usually getting somebody in 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade or older, okay? The non-reader is a student who has actually been exposed to reading and still, when I check it, doesn't know his consonants or vowels. Or he knows his consonants and not his vowels. So this puts us at what I call a start 1, which means we really pretty much have a non-reader. Start 2 is what I see most in the clinic. These are students that can read 1-syllable words. Can't really do 2-syllable words or silent E, but they're okay with short vowels and 1-syllable words. They cannot remember words visually, either can this group. The reason they can't is what's called the fusiform gyrus behind the left ear, the lower left ear, is not firing. And therefore they can't remember sight words. So with a student in this program, if you have a sight word approach, it's totally useless because their word form area is not recording those words. Dr. Shaywitz talks about that in depth in her 2002 book, Overcoming Dyslexia. But there's ways we can stimulate the word form area, and my program's all about that, trying to stimulate that. But we're primarily working on systematic phonics here. Then we have start 3, which is the emerging reader. They're getting ready for 2-syllable words, and they're starting to break through, but their word form area often is not firing as of yet. And then we have start 4 as a child who knows consonant teams and vowels, sometimes our family, diphthongs. They usually have had some sort of phonics program by a good teacher, but they have gaps in their knowledge and they're not fluent and they're not fast in their word attack. So this is really where we go as fast as we can. And then we have the start 5 who is breaking through the reading process, but has trouble usually in fluency and comprehension. The ones we work, it's usually a comprehension program, and we have an in-depth program for comprehension for these kids on the spectrum, ESL kids, that has a whole different premise than the first 4. We'll probably address that in another webinar, but right now, we're gonna kind of stay here. Now, the non-reader, we are using movements, which I'm gonna show in a moment. But the program says, what about cleaning up the consonants in one day? All right, so let me show you what I mean by that so it makes sense that I'm not crazy here, okay? Now, what I found is start 2 students who can read 1-syllable words, in almost every case, know the consonants. And they have an idea of most of the vowels, but they put us on it. So here's a typical start 2. Ba, ka, da, fa, ga, la, ma. Okay, that's a typical start 2. So what I do initially is I take my fingers like a scissors, which I'll show you when I come back on the screen, and cut off the in front of my mouth. I'll act like I'm cutting off an and say, let's cut off the And if they still go pa, ka, da, I then remove the board and do these sounds orally. So I remove the board. My premise is this: they've been taught incorrectly. Now, often, I'll be honest, I've taught 4,000 teachers, and majority of teachers don't know their sounds, and they put us on things. That's just fact. It's partly, it's not taught in college. And often, majority of teachers who teach phonics don't know the full code or how to teach diphthongs or certain vowel teams or certain spelling rules, etc. So they have a limited view that I see. So often these kids are just doing what they were taught, but, duh. So what I do is I remove the board. Now this was a case I did with the severest problem kid. Everything was ba, ka, da, fa. And I thought, you know, this is problematic. So I moved the board and I did this. And just do it with me at home. B, b, k, k, d, d, g, g, j, j, k, k, o, m, Notice your lips are puckered, like red. You're not doing a smile, because that's ER, IR, and UR. It's puckered lips. That's when they have trouble with. My found students have trouble with R, L, X, and Y. Okay. S, t, t, v, v. Don't cut that off too soon or you'll get va. Va. It's v. It continues. Now with what we put a slight on it so that they can hear the sound. Actually, the W sets your mouth for the vowel, but I found it impractical when we were working with sound. So it's a slight yeah, z. Okay. This kid did it all perfectly. By the way, in almost every case with the kids that were start 2s, I found I could do that and they could do it cleanly. okay? So then what I do is I go back to the board. Do you see that, Steve?
Yes, you're up on the board.
Okay. I go back to the board and I do what's called spelling and reading sounds. So in spelling, I'm saying the sound and they'll show me how it's spelled. So what I'm going to do is go back and reattach that. So I'll first go with each sound and go b, b, k, k, d, d. Notice I put these two together. We get two birds with one stone. G, g, j, k. So I'll go back and clean them up. There's two of them here. They're both saying. I clean those sounds up. This is before I actually start my lesson. Okay? Then I will do spell and read sound. So spelling, I'm going to say the sound and they'll find it. Now, if they're like most kids, they're going to have trouble with R, L, X, and Y. So I'll do more than that. So I'll go and they'll go x, yeah, d, b, b, k, g, g, x, yeah. So we'll quickly do that. Then I move to reading where I point and they read the sound. So the child would quickly go g, j, etc. They read the sounds and then I'll point to the ones they had trouble with. Okay. Now, this is in Bloom's taxonomy at the level of information, where we're getting the information into the child. This is what flashcards do, but I think, number one, flashcards bore kids to death. This is very active and doesn't. But also flashcards have the name and the keyword, A, apple, et cetera, which are interference systems. So this at the information level replaces the flashcards. However, this would not work by itself. I must also include these letters with the vowels in phonemic awareness activities. And phonemic awareness activities are hitting upper level of Bloom's. They're hitting synthesis and analysis, and that's a different part of the brain. So I'm going to come back to this later on to show, after I've cleaned them up, what I do to make them stick. Okay, so this is a start to. I clean up the consonants, then I'll clean up the vowels. So with the vowels, I'll first just check them. And I've had kids go, period. Good. I'll have kids go, that's a common mistake, oo, and then I have to clean them up. So I'll clean them up by saying them, and then I will have them try it. And if they quickly clean them up, I'll then do spell and read. If not, I will go to the movements, okay, which I'm going to show you now. Now the movements I use with my Start 1 kids. These are kids who know nothing. And I will use the movements to get across the consonants and vowels. So we're going to go to that sheet, okay, which you have a copy of. Okay, you can see b, k, d, g. Okay. Now, you see that sheet. If you've got your own, have it in front of you, because I'm going to have to put it off to do the movements, okay? So, stop share. Okay. Now, so let's go ahead. So with the younger kids, I will do movements to tie down the sound. So I'll show the letter B, and then I will go b, 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 looking down at the baby, b, 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 like I'm rocking a baby, b, 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 k, 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 like we're cutting, k, 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 drumming, d, 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 d. A flag, f, 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 drinking, g, 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 running, starting a car, j, 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 j. Kicking, licking a lollipop, oh, oh, oh. Something tastes good, rub the belly. A horse, A balloon popping. A lion. Roar. Notice my mouth is rounded there. Roar. Roar. A snake. The clock, an old-fashioned clock going. A vacuum cleaner. Washing machine. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Sneeze. I'll actually make an X with my fingers. A yawn. Yep. And a zipper. Okay. Now, with the child who knows nothing, I only do 4 consonants and 1 vowel, and I put them in a book, which I'll show you. I put everyone in a book first day. I don't care who it is. Everyone starts reading day 1. Never been an exception. Every kid I've ever worked with, we start reading. And that's a 5-year-old who I introduced to 4 consonants and 1 vowel. The reason is I don't want to stay at the level of information. I want to move to levels of comprehension, analysis, and synthesis in Bloom's taxonomy so that, and pragmatic intelligence, so the use of it's obvious to a child. Now having these consonants and vowels isn't always the panacea. I had a student who had pretty severe speech and language issues. He was an 8th grader. He'd been in a program that does mastery teaching, and he was at the same level for 3 years because he couldn't do R, L, X, and Y properly. And he was reading at 1.9 when I got him. I basically checked his sounds and he wasn't doing them properly. However, when we read a word, like for roar, it'd be you know. When he read a word like rat, you go at, he knew the word. And if I gave him the word rat to spell, he'd go at, and he knew the word. So I quickly found out what he could do for those sounds, and I just moved forward. Then I taught him he could do the 1-syllable words. I taught him how to break down 2-syllable words. I got him into a book. Then I taught him how to work with closed and open syllables and 2-syllable words. And by the end of the week, he was reading at 3.5. His tutor worked with him the next 6 weeks. He came back reading at 6.5. He then read Hatchet and several books. By the end of the year, he read my high school series, which went to 10.5. He then went on to read American Lit, British Lit, physics. He was the smartest kid I've ever worked with. He got straight A's, went on to college. See, he was being held back because of a philosophy of mastery. What I have found is that the higher takes care of the lower. So if they're having little issues, I'm moving forward because the higher skills will start pulling in the lower skills. So I'm moving pretty quickly. By the way, if the higher are not, I'll go back and rework some of the lower skills to bring them up. Okay. So though I'm trying to get the sounds in correctly, there are cases where I don't worry about it. And it's in that particular case. Okay, let's go ahead and review those movements, and then I'll show you how this is used. So we've got b, b, b. Everyone with me? B, b, b. We've got k, k, k. I think I heard a cut over there. K, k, k. Ready? D, 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 d. It's not fa. It's f. There you go. G, g, g. Somebody put a ha to my right. Not a ha. Okay. We got j, 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 k, k, k. Oh. Okay, I heard a lot over there. Oh, oh. Okay, so let's go back to oh. Definitely heard some ers. Round your mouth, and think of the word red. Okay, that's where I may use a keyword to help. Red. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Yep. Okay, so you have a layout of those. We'll review those at the end of the lesson, but those are, you can pick up pretty quickly. Okay, so let me go back. All right, Steve, can you see this again?
Yep. There you go. You
Okay.
got the pictures. Yep.
Now, the key is the start. So we have to have a quick way of getting the starts. And this is not meant to be a diagnostic program, but you at least need to know how I'm coming up with these starts. So the start one's a non-reader. And if you'll look at these skills here, the students are able to do very little of the Tattum reading survey, have very low phonological skills, reading scores below first grade level, etc. So on the test, which I have, they have trouble with these words and they can't read this. So they're definitely hurting. When I check these kids, sometimes they know the consonants, but don't know the vowels. So I will clean up all the consonants and do short A and put them in a short A book. But I have cases where the child knows nothing. And so I have to start from scratch. And I'll show that in a minute. Okay. Now, start 2 is lower reading test scores of first, second grade and problems with words 1 to 10 of the reading survey. Okay. And they put us on everything. In other words, they're doing this. They might call this like and prop, and they struggle a bit on this passage and they can't do these. Okay, that's a start 2. And that's the child I usually just clean up the consonants and vowels and then move into a lesson. The start 3 kids are kids that are at the breaking stage. They can do some 2-syllable words, a little magic E, silent E, but that's about it. But they're ready to do some breaking words. And they're breaking down kind of here. They'll call this ever often, drove, crud, flame, crim or crime. But how you know they don't know silent E is they'll go don't win, mop, and grip at the rugged spots in life. Okay. And then they'll might get happen, but they'll have trouble with collapse, suppose, often described, and they'll break down here. That's a start 3. Start 4, on the other hand, is these are students that are maybe only a year or 2 behind. They've usually had phonics, so they have skills. They know often our family, diphthongs, etc. So with this child, and this is very controversial in other quarters, but for me, it just makes common sense and works. With this child, I'll clean up their consonants. I'll clean up their short vowels. I'll clean up their our family. I'll clean up the diphthongs, and I'll start cleaning what I call is the walkers. These ones actually fit 2 vowels go walking, first does the talking, these. And I'll clean those up. And then I'll put them in a book that's either at diphthongs or walkers, which they can do fairly well. So day 1, now by cleaning them up, now every day I'm going to be reviewing that, but I give them credit for what they know and I put them in a book. Meanwhile, in the spelling component, I'm often going back to what people know as the floss rule or the tricky trio or the doubling rule. I'll be going back and picking that up as I move ahead in the reading. So with my start 4s, we really move. I also teach start 4s how to phrase read, usually in the first week, because they're stuck at word reading. Okay. All right. So, all right. Then when we have a child who does well all the way through here, which I just had one 2 days ago do, I then look at other problems. And in this kid's case, he didn't like to read. He had some comprehension issues. And what I found is that he would lose the information as he read. So I worked with him on some comprehension. I teach him how to yellow, highlight key ideas, pink for the most important ideas, how to circle keywords and then rehearse. But the interesting thing, those who know about typology, he actually is an ESFP type. And ESFP in the Myers-Briggs typology are notorious for not liking to read because they're constantly active in like physical activities and socializing. So it's something you've got to generate in them is that level of reading. And that's actually the case with him. Okay, so now let's go with this kid that has the 4 consonants, okay? This is the book we will do it.
Can I jump in here with a question?
Sure.
So, 2 seconds. One of the attendees wanted to know, when you're making the drinking motion for D, It seems like a gulping sound. Would you mind doing that
Sure.
once more to clarify?
G, 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 g. It's not g, g. It's more g. Mhm. And that's how the sound G is good. Unless it's in front of IE or Y, then it says J.
Thank you.
Good question. Any others? No? I can move on. Okay.
Sorry, I was muted. No, for now, there's a lot of questions about, not questions, but observations about the assessments, but we can get into that when we're
Sure.
done, I think.
Yeah. That assessment I showed you takes about 5 minutes. And we merge that also with the tower for phonetic and sight word ability and an oral reading, words per minute test. And then a look at a quick spelling. And then we read one of my books to make sure he's in the proper book. And that takes us about 35 minutes, 40 minutes with kids to do that. Okay. All right, so let's go back. Okay, so with the child that basically is at 4 letters, we will be pulling out I think that's the other letter. And so we will be, once we do the movements, we'll give a sound like, but they'll show us the movement and point. They'll show us the movement and point. They'll show us the movement and point. They'll show us the movement and point, okay? And we'll review that several times. Then we will point and they'll just say the sounds, okay? Then I will give them some nonsense words that they will sound out. So I'll say, pull out app, and they need to go app. Notice they're getting reinforcement of the sounds, app. And we do what's called step tracking. Good. Now make it at, and I'll say, this is where the t is going to go. And they go at. Good. Now make it ab, b. So notice, even though we're working with syllables, we're working with sounds. Now make it tab, ab, tab. And then I will move letters and they will read. App. Ass, etc. Then once I'm done with that, I will give spelling words, a few spelling words that hit this, like at, as, bat, pat, that they will say the sounds, and then we will go into the book, okay? So let me show you how that goes. Okay? So once we're in the book, I will go ahead and again review the sounds. First, I would have them do the movements as I'm doing it. And we would do that. And then I'd point and they'd read. Then we would go to sounding out words. And they would do one, and then I would model one. I would usually start at, and they'd have to say the word sat. Then they would go at. Then they'd say the word bat. Then I would go at, and I would say, they'd say tab. Then she would go at, and go cab, and then I would do this. Okay. I then can say the word and have them point. I can give a definition and have them point, or randomly point. This is a Slingerland 4-step method, which I use to review words. I can or cannot do that. And then we read phrases, a cab together, at a cat, tab has, a cab, at a cat, tab has, a couple times. And then we go into the story, the cab. So here's what a child will go. Tab, as, has, at. I see, great. Now let's reread that again. Tab, has, a cat. All right, read it with me. Tab has a cat. Great job. So he made a couple errors. So the next one I will read and have him read with me. Are you ready? Read with me. Tab has a, and then I'll leave this word out. Do you know that word? Sound it up, but at, bat. Good. Now you read it. Tab has a bat. Great. Let's go ahead and read what we have. Tab has a cat. Tab has a bat. Good. Let's go to the next. Are you ready? Taha, okay. The, with me, the, at, bat, at, sat. Tab. Now, if he's getting tired after sounding out two words, I'll take over and finish, and then we'll read it together. So we'll go through the first book like that. And then we add 4 more consonants. Still sad. And then from there, we move to another book of the van. Again, I'm going to show you other books. And we add more consonants. And then we add more. And we now have all the consonants and short a. So there are tons of books, as you know, that have consonants and short vowels, one vowel at a time. Any of those are good. So we're now ready to go to consonants and short a. Now some start ones, know the consonants and short a. They don't know the other vowels. So we'll start with doing the book with the consonants and short a. Okay. So this is like our beginning start one child. Okay, let me get out of that. All right.
Hey, Steve, can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
There's a attendee that would like to know, how do you teach irregular high frequency words like the?
Okay. Now, we use a technique called orthographic mapping that's developed by the Reading League, which I would be doing. That requires another workshop. But at distance learning, I will often do it by having the child, having the word written, have the child write the, and then say the whole word as they write it, the, not the letter names. Keep in mind, I'm working on sounds. The. They'll trace it 3 to 4 times, cover it, copy. They'll then copy it 3 times, and then they'll turn over and do it from memory, okay? Now, if the word form area is pretty severe, like one student, that's not gonna work. And I don't care if you do it 50 days in a row, it won't work. I have a child that took 350 times with the word the and would still call it then. He had severe word form area problems. Now, let's just do a quick mini on the word form area. When you process phonics, you're using the Broca's area, which is your temple, and that helps you sound out words. And then right here is the Wernicke's area, which goes, I know that word. So you go in the temple, you're going it, oh, that's tin. I know what tin is. At, oh, I know what it is. That's fat. When these two work together, the back area below the ear, called the fusiform gyrus, starts being innervated. And once it innervates, it takes pictures of the word, which really makes reading easy, because when I see the word, I don't have to go back here and then up here and sound out and back. I can, when I read a word, go back here, I know the word, make a connection and read. It's called the word form area. Almost all my start ones, all my start twos, and some of my start threes don't have that firing. So the sight word doesn't stick. So I'll start with sight words with that technique, or the orthographic mapping, which is another workshop. We'll start with that, but if they have trouble, I don't get hung up on it. So when we're reading and a sight word comes, I give it to them, knowing that their word form area isn't firing and they're not going to remember it. But I still keep trying to pick it up, like the word the was one that I keep coming back to because you see it so often. But that's a severe case. Normally, just doing that 3-3-3 technique will work, and orthographic mapping actually works even better. So that's how I work. Now, I add 3 sight words per lesson. I have 25 lessons, and I'll have 3 sight words starting with a, are, and the, then to, do, and was. And I'll add these if the child can handle it. Okay, great question. Others?
Yeah, so I have another question that was a question about whether or not this is has to do with Haggerty.
If this is what?
Has to do with Haggerty?
Haggerty.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask Deborah if she'd be willing to go live and ask that question.
Good.
Deborah, I just unmuted you. Would you mind asking your question?
I think she's still muted. At least I see her.
Unmute.
Okay. Well, we can work that out, Steve, and come back to it.
Yeah, sorry, Zoom's giving me trouble here.
Okay, we'll come back to that because those of you who said, well, he cleaned up the consonants, that'll never stick, need to see the next step for my start 2s and 3s. So, because they're right, that would never stick unless you're going to be doing what I'm recommending. Okay, so we are going to take this child who we just cleaned up the consonants and vowels. And we're going to work information, Bloom's taxonomy, lowest level. Very quickly, we're going to do the spelling of sounds, and we're going to go r, and they're going to go r, ol, they're going to go ol, x, they're going to go x, y, b, d, f, r, ol, x, y. Notice I'm hitting the tougher ones. Then I'm going to go to the vowels. I always start the vowels in order. I, a. So the child echoes and points. Then I'll get them in random order. They'll go they'll go they'll go ah. The big problem kids have is they want to call this and they'll have trouble calling this either it or a. So we need to practice, okay? And I'll show you the vowels, the movements for the vowels that we will go to in a little bit if there's problems there, okay? Now, if they're having trouble with a particular consonant, I will go ahead and do the movement. So I'll go rrr and make the animal sign rrr. Or if I'll make the snake sign. So I'll use a couple of the movements for problems. Like one child had a heck of a time with v, so I did the vacuum cleaner, and ks, I do the sneeze. And so I will add those movements for the problem sounds. So I'll quickly clean up the consonants and the vowels. Then I will point and they will say the sounds. And I go back to the problem sounds, okay? So that's the level of information, like flashcards. But I'm now going to go to the level of analysis and synthesis. So I will have a sequence in my manual for all lessons. And this one might start out by pull out pef, and they will go pa, eh. Then I'll introduce step tracking, where they point to each sound, push up the change, and make the change. All right, pef, make it pecs. So the child will go, eh. This is where the x is going. They'll push that change up and put pecs. Now make it picks, 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 picks. Make it licks, licks, ul, ix. Make it lax, lax, ul, ax. You have locks, I want lax. Child make change. You have, I want. Okay? So we will do that, which is the level of synthesis. And then I will put in sounds for reading, and they'll sound it out. Ax. Ax. Ox, and they'll read it. So they're using analysis to this to analyze it. Those are in different parts of the brain than information. It's a practical intelligence. Sternberg talks about practical intelligences. And this is a more practical approach to intelligence, is this approach. Okay, so we cleaned up the sounds. We then did it with syllables. Now I go to spelling words. They take a sheet of paper and I give them real words like fun. And they'll go fun, while they're writing. Him, it, while they're writing. Pit, it. So they say the sounds. And they'll write however they write. With print, cursive. Cursive isn't even taught anymore, and print isn't taught that well. And if a child's writing is terrible, we have a separate handwriting program called home run handwriting, but there's plenty of them, good handwriting programs that you can use. Okay. And then after we're done with that and spelling, we will go to, if the kid's a fifth grader, it's start to. We will go to a more challenging book. And this is what I wrote for fifth graders, fourth, fifth graders to eighth grade. And here we also have the addition of teams, which we would quick check out. But he'd go thick, black, we'd alternate. I'd go lost, he goes lost, grass, he goes grass. Walk, walk, sand. We alternate. So I sound out a word, he tells it to me, then he sounds out a word. Then we go to suffixes, and then we read the phrases together. Okay. Then we go to the book. The book is written at a first grade level. It's simple sentences with mostly closed syllables. So the child will read pointing to each word. And if I'm on the internet, I might initially point for them. So the child might go, Bill and Tom get back by sex. Whoops, I point above it. He'll go 6. The fog will roll in at 6. Yelled Bull, I'll point above it, Bill, and Tom's mom. Now he made 2 struggles, so I'm going to take over. And on the internet, since there is a pause in reading, normally in this pressure release, we read together when I take over and I pick up the pace. But there is a pause on the internet, so I do the echo drill, where I read it correctly and then he reads it after me. This got them mad. And he goes, this got them mad. The fog got to their island at 6 at night. Then he reads, the fog got to their island at 6 at night. Then he takes over. Now the echo drill is especially good when you use punctuation. Like I'm working with a kid now on Hatchet and the book by Paulson. And there's all kinds of exclamation points, dashes. And when I do it, I will explain to them what a dash means, what a comma means, and how that's read, and how emotion is getting across. So the echo reading is great to do that. I'll do that for a couple sentences, and then he'll take over. So the most struggles I'll give is 2, okay? Now, just so you don't think I'm selling my stuff, there is a company called High Noon that has incredible multicultural books that start with beginning phonics. One is called Moondog, and it has series 1 to 3. Moondog 1 to 3, and this is through High Noon. Magic Belt, which does really good stuff with closed syllables. Alba, which also does good things. And then Totem, which deals with upper level phonics. So it's High Noon, Moondog 1 to 3, Magic Belt, Alba, and Totem, okay? Those can work just as well. And they're great multicultural books, okay? All right, so now let's go ahead and pull together what we've covered so far, right? We talked about that how I introduce the consonants and vowels depends on the start. And if you have a start 1, you have to do the movements, okay? And the movements we talked about are these movements. Let's quick review. B is where you're rocking a baby. K, cutting. D, drumming. D, f, the flag. G, 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 you're running. J, starting a car. K, you're kicking. You're eating a sucker. Is the belly. N is the horse. Balloon. R is the lion. S is the snake. T is the clock. T, 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 v, vacuum cleaner. W, washing machine. X, sneeze. Y, yawning. And Z. Okay, now we also have the vowels. With the vowels, we're going to have itch. Scratch is I. And echo for eh is the key word. We do use a key word here with the vowels to help. Ax, ah, up, and on, ah. Okay, so now here's how these are taught. So I go I, hold up an I, this looks like an I. Take your arm and scratch it. I. And if they need a keyword, we'll go itch. Eh, I'll make it a little E with your hand here, and I'll say it's a seashell. Hear the echo, echo, eh, 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 eh. I initially did eh, like you're having trouble hearing, and then this parent said her kid was humiliated by people doing that, so that day we changed it to echo, eh. Then we have ah, like you're crying, ah, make an A with your hand, ah. You can also do ax for older kids who don't like that, cry, ah. You make a U and you're confused. Hit your forehead. Then you go to a doctor and you open your mouth and you go ah. Notice my head's up because is in your head. And the most confused sound besides and is and aw, which is AUAW. And the difference is this: is in your head and aw is in your belly. Aw. And I'll have kids look up for and look down for aw. Okay. So now we had one child, and I know we're almost out of time. We had one child read like this the first 2 weeks and then changed it. Well, I'm actually going to have to show it. She was reading the book and she went the k, at, cat had a she did much better than I did. And she would read her first 2 phonics books that way, and then once she got the sounds out, she just let it go. But she was a total non-reader and broke in that way. Okay. So let's kind of summarize. In summary, then, depending on the child's start, we will either do movements and attach it, or we will, if they're start 2, 3, or 4, we'll quickly clean up their consonants, vowels, and their consonant teams. We'll clean them up and get them right into using it in spelling and reading. If they don't know the sounds, we'll go ahead and do the movements and teach the sounds. Now, if you have a traditional Orton program that does the linkages in that, that's great for first kindergarten and beginning first graders. But if you do the whole program, see, one of the things that happens in classes is teachers don't know the whole system and only teach consonant and vowels. But you have diphthongs, you have our family, you have all the vowel teams, you have endings. So you've got to be able to do the whole program, and you should be able to do the whole program in first grade. However, there's kids in there who can read Harry Potter. And if you're doing phonics, when you come to reading, they should be allowed to choose books and read, and you do conferences with them, or you give a group book that you do a group reading with. Otherwise, they will be bored to tears. Do we have a question? Okay.
Yeah, Steve, we do. A couple questions, actually. So Beverly was asking, and I don't know, Beverly, if you want to go off mute and ask it yourself, about whether or not you worry about regional dialects and differences.
No, I don't. I give them the sound, but if the main thing is in Canada, they tend to give let's see, I think the and are the same sound. In some places, they pronounce so I try to get them close to the correct sound, which is controversial, but the correct Orton sound, as close as they can to help spelling. If you don't separate and that means there's a lot of words you got to memorize. So I try to get it as clean, but if it's a huge problem, I don't worry about it because it won't really interfere with the reading. It can interfere with spelling, but won't really interfere that much with reading. So I clean it up as best I can. My whole goal, again, is to go as fast as I can, as slow as I must. And my pace is the books. And that's why I wrote 100 books. I have 10 reading series for all ages. The reason is it's clear to me that phonics programs often do naming deck, reading deck, spelling deck, new concept, spelling words, handwriting, and reading words, but don't read text. Whereas in mine, the board work takes half the period, and half my period is reading and writing. Because I believe in the pragmatic application of the sounds. And so my books set the pace. If a child's going through a book quick, I make sure I teach the next sound or next concept for the next book. Okay. All right, back to summary.
So one last little question.
Sure.
At what point do you introduce and start teaching digraphs?
Well, consonant digraphs, I will often teach the same. For kids, I'll often clean it up with the consonants and the vowels. Now, that's unless the kid's struggling a bit with the consonant vowels. But if they aren't, I will just check them. And what I'll find is kids will often know the diphthongs, except for WH, which I pronounce. They'll know CH and SH. They might not know So I will quickly teach those. So by the way, technically QU is not a digraph, it's a blend, but I call them teams. So I'll clean them up. But if the kid has problems, my lesson 2 is teaching digraphs. And I do that through movements like the choo-choo, quiet. Blowing out a candle for WH. Queen, queen, nasty team. So I'll teach those. But again, with a lot of my start 2s, I can clean up the consonant teams and vowels and get going. Right.
Another question was that, if you have a student that's mastered the sounds, should you go back at some point and do a checkup, or how does that?
Well, yeah,
function?
no, all kids I check up, absolutely. So they work with them. Now, if they work with them a couple of years, I'm moving away from that. I move away from a few months and I move more into syllables. But as we're starting, yeah, if they've mastered the sounds, remember how I did the board. I check what they know. They knew the consonants, our family, the short vowels, the diphthongs, and the green walkers. Okay. So I will review those somewhat regularly, but very quickly. Any problem he has, I will review. But I also have to review them for spelling because they won't know what's the best bet for spelling. Then I'll have them apply it in my syllable work. And there it gets pretty, for a kid like that, I'm giving words like shall thoy, make it shoe thay, make it thaw loo. I mean, I give 2 syllable tracking. It's very challenging where they have to apply it. Okay.
Thank you.
Any others? No? All right. So let's close. So the basis of my decision has to do with what start are they? And it just doesn't make sense with a kid who you can clean up the consonants, teams, and vowels first day to take each one of them through a linkage. So within a month, or you're not even getting where I'm getting day 1 within 6 weeks. Okay. However, if you're dealing with kindergarten kids and first grade, the traditional Orton sequence can work well. It's a great program. Slingerland's great, Wilson's great. Alphabetic phonics, which is my favorite. And that's where I learned from Ailey Cox, go as fast as you can, as slow as you must. Project Read, they're all good. But keep in mind that there are kids in that class who can read pretty well. And those kids, when you're reading, should be allowed to read higher level books, okay? But in my case, I'm working with kids across the whole table from 5 to 65. So I have a 4th grader who's a start 2. I'm cleaning up all those consonants, teams, and vowels. I'm getting them in a book right off the bat. With the start 1, who knows nothing, I'm introducing 4 sounds with the movement and 1 vowel, and I put them into a book. Again, the Moondog I mentioned has a similar approach, okay? And then the key thing is that those sounds that we cleaned up won't stick unless you use them through analysis and synthesis. called phonemic awareness. So fit, make it fat, make it flat, make it flask, make it floss, make it really quick where they have to change and they're using the sounds. That's what makes it work, okay? Now keep in mind, one of our goals is to stimulate the word form area. And these techniques, the spell and read sounds, the spell and read syllables, the reading right away, all stimulate that word form area. And how you know the word form area is going is when they sound out a word, crude, and when they see it again, they go crude, hop up and yell, because that means their word form area is firing. Because if they don't, if it's not, they're sounding it out again and again and again. So it's when they sound out a word and they know it, you know the word form area is starting to fire. Okay, so kind of a multi-approach, more movements at start 1, start 2, 3, and 4, clean up consonants, often the teams and the vowels, but reinforce it through the phonemic skills. Last point is with the phonics program, the key is we don't want them to be a phonics student forever. And what happens is teachers do not complete the program in remedial classes. They might do the consonants and vowels, and then the child will go next year and all they know is consonants and vowels. And maybe that teacher's had reading recovery and does reading recovery. Then the third year, they go back and somebody's did alphabetic phonics and they're back to consonants and vowels. Then the fourth year, somebody did another program and they do that. And then the fifth year, somebody did Wilson, they do, and that's why it doesn't work. And that's why you've got to have a faster approach. You know, our start 1s, we knock off at grade level and I'm usually 100 hours. Our start 2s at 80, our start 3s at around 60 hours, and they're done. Start 4s and 5s more like 40 hours. So the idea is we got to do this quicker or the kid ends up getting caught in phonics limbo. So thanks for coming. Appreciate all of your coming. Next week, we'll be dealing with fluency, how word attack contributes, repeated readings, what I call pressure release, the echo drill, and other things. Bye. Woohoo.
Steve, let me just jump in here before we go out and just say thank you very much for being here today. I'm super appreciative of everybody being and learning from us and trying to figure out what we're doing. Learn Up Centers is a nonprofit. We have a dual income model where we have tuition for those who can afford to, and we try to raise funding for those who are unable to pay. We also offer trainings. We're going to be doing a training in phonics, so we're also going to be doing a training in comprehension. We'll also be looking to hire some tutors in the near future. So if you're interested in becoming a tutor for Learn Up Centers, with the new virtual reality that we're all in, where you live is less important than whether or not you can run the program. So reach out to us if you're interested in that as well. Thank you very much for being here, and we look forward to seeing you next time.